right, welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here with you today alongside Ed Leahy of RTÉ Sport Online. You can watch or listen to this podcast every week on RTÉ.ie, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts or other platforms. And this week we're joined by Keith Treacy and journalist David Sneyd. And also this week we've got live coverage of the UEFA Under-17s Championships on the RTÉ News channel from Wednesday. Ireland playing Poland in Budapest that day from 3:30 p.m. And as I said, you can watch that live. Ireland will have Wales on 20th of May, and then the last group game against the hosts Hungary on the 23rd. And Keith, that kind of made me look back at your own career in terms of under-17s level, and perusing it, I saw you were over in a tournament in Japan called the Toyota International Youth Tournament in 2004. Does it spring back any memories?
Yeah, there's a couple of memories. I remember the flight to Japan. I think it was about 11 hours to get to where we were going, and we had to fly onwards then to Nagoya. So it was an awful long time to get there. But once the jet lag wore off and we got into the tournament, I really enjoyed it. I had to say, I didn't have any idea that football was so big in Japan even back then. So it was brilliant to go over there and play football for Ireland at that age group. And you know, it was excellent just to be able to travel and do them sort of things. But yeah, brilliant memories and ones that you probably don't realise at the time, but they're some of the best memories I have now. So excellent memories to be able to look back upon.
Yeah, and those type of youth squads, when you're part of them, do you just generally keep in touch with those players, or there's a bigger bond with that generation of players than maybe players you play with at senior level? I mean, there was the likes of Alan Judge in there, Stephen Henderson as well, was one of the goalkeepers.
Yeah, well, I think you have a few more memories because at the time it wasn't ultra professional. We were at that time where, you know, some of us are still, although most of us would have been at English clubs at underage level, we weren't, you know, fully fledged professionals. So on the downtime, we were having a little bit of a little bit of fun. So you get the memories that maybe you don't get when you're in the first team. But yeah, they are bonds that are made for life. And although I don't keep in touch with an awful lot of footballers that I played with over my time, but you know, I'm not I'm not into social media. I don't really have a phone 9 times out of 10. So for me, I do have brilliant memories of it, but personally, I don't keep in touch with many of them. But strong bonds are always there with underage players.
Yeah, and I think
you didn't stay in Saipan, no?
Sorry?
You didn't stay in Saipan when you went over?
Saipan, no. Jesus, who's going to sidestep that question? Stay away from the Saipan stuff.
Yeah, and actually I was just perusing the squad, David, actually, the squad that's playing in Hungary over the next week or so, and all but 2 of them play their club football in the League of Ireland, which probably just does show that sort of Brexit effect. And it's a stark contrast to what it would have been like, say, 20 years ago, say in Keith's time, where there were a lot more of the squad that would have been involved that were playing in England or up in Scotland.
Yeah, no, I think what you say is just the effect of Brexit, and it's also just another indication of what now has to happen at underage level in Ireland. And we see obviously the structures that are being put in place, but also it's just going to be another reminder as well of the challenges that are going to be in place. You see some of the results that, say, some of the underage teams get, and it they can hold their own a lot of the time at underage, and it's when they get to these next couple of years afterwards that's when the difference comes in terms of that full-time level of coaching, and when the level of athleticism and all the rest of that comes into being full-time professionals. It's almost these next couple of years afterwards that you'll see the jump, because at underage, you always see Irish lads and Irish teams being well able to hold their own, and players being well capable to a certain point. And this is just I think it's just going to reflect a lot of the challenges that, as I said already, that are going to be happening over the next couple of years with Irish clubs and Irish academies, where, you know, again, it's you hate to talk about it. You have to talk about it. Just the financial side of it that's going to have to come down the line to be able to bring Irish academies up to speed and up to scratch, to be able to give those Irish players that are going to have to stay here a bit longer the necessary backing to be able to properly progress. You know, it's we've said this before, and it's nice to see some of the Irish lads who do now maybe go abroad a little bit earlier, or say abroad. So I'm talking about going to Europe, because maybe you can't go to clubs in Britain because of Brexit. But that's just a similar kind of issue. That's the exact same issue that we've already had down the years, and what Keith would have experienced, where he, in his case, obviously going to Blackburn Rovers as a 15, 16-year-old. And yeah, it's great that you see the likes of some young lads now maybe going to, say, an AC Milan, or say, in Kevin Zeffy's case, Inter Milan, and there's lads obviously going, say, James Banquet going to Udinese, and obviously, Festy Ebosele, he would have went obviously to England first in Derby County, and then he's gone over But it's the same issue. Do you know what I mean? It's just a bit more glamorous because it's not maybe clubs, unfashionable clubs. No disrespect, Heath, the like of a Blackburn, who would have been in the 90s and 90s, would have had serious calibre because of some of the success they had and the finance that would have been behind them. It might sound a bit more glamorous now when lads are going to different types of clubs in Europe, but it's the same issue. You know what I mean? And that's why it's great now where you see, as you say, so many of these Irish lads in the 17s who are in and around League of Ireland academies and first teams, like say Mason Mealy, who came on for Pats the other night and looked quite decent in terms of even the physicality side of things. But it's just a reminder of the next challenge that's going to be there for Irish academies and making sure that the next step that Irish lads have to take, that the structures are in place for them.
Yeah, and just a reminder for people, so that first Ireland under-17s European Championship match against Poland is going to be on Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. RTÉ News channel. I'm just going to stick to the international team first before we move on to more domestic matters, and it relates to something Vera Pauw said, Ed, which is in relation to the release of players ahead of the upcoming World Cup. So the European Clubs Association directive, the players should only be released for international duty 10 days before the start of the Women's World Cup, which from Vera Pauw's point of view is not ideal. So let's listen to her first, and you might just give us a little bit of context.
They are not experts in individual periodization. I am. And the program that we put in is not to overload players. The program that we put in is to get players ready and fresh, not only for the World Cup, but to make sure that they go back to the clubs and not get injured after. To put us into that position is not really wise, is not protecting the players, actually putting the players in a very unsafe and dangerous situation. If this is going to happen, you can put the ambulances next to the pitch for all the ACLs that are going to hospital.
So that is Ireland manager Vera Pauw speaking to Tony O'Donoghue last week. Ed, pretty strong comments there, and obviously from her point of view, that directive is not ideal.
No, it's not ideal. From her point of view, first of all, she's absolutely right. There's no way she can prepare her squad and travel to Australia to play in a World Cup with such little time to prepare with the players, and then take into account travel, jet lag, acclimatization, even the chance of playing a couple of warm-up games, as you would see in the Men's World Cup, a traditional Men's World Cup in the summertime. Now, we're not sure. Obviously, a lot of players will be idle at the end of the season and stuff, but with the women's team, they could be playing in different leagues throughout Europe and America. So it remains to be seen when she will be able to get the full squad together, how many players will get early release from clubs, all that sort of stuff. And I imagine a lot of clubs will be very forthcoming and sort of, they'll certainly
they'll accommodate in a way.
Of course, they don't want their players coming back injured anyway, so they'll want the best for the players. And if she thinks it's going to affect them, potential for injury, they'll certainly want to play ball. You just have to look at the men's football and go back to last summer and Ireland's international window in June. And a similar thing happened where the Irish players were idle for 6 weeks, some of them, before the first match, and then they just didn't perform in the first match. So that's that's just an example. And Stephen Kenny has taken those a different approach to these summer's games with a Bristol training camp and then on to Turkey before going to Greece. So Vera Pauw on that front, she's from a footballing front, she's absolutely right. But I think two things: the club football in women's football seems to be that bit more advanced and progressive than what we see at international level. We're constantly seeing international level issues cropping up, from the American team to the Canadian team, going back to our own tracksuit dilemma back in the day. It just seems to be playing catch up. And even only 2 weeks ago, to sort of coincide with the Vera Pauw stuff, Gianni Infantino is threatening a blackout on the 5 major footballing nations for the Women's World Cup, because he reckons that the broadcasters aren't paying enough to show the World Cup. So he used to sort of come as a two for one deal. If you were rights holder for the men's, I think with the Women's World Cup as well. So, it just seems that women's international football is playing a bit of catch up. And then even if you just go back to the Qatar World Cup, where we see that World Cup squeezed into the men's season, and suddenly players didn't get as much time in the build up, and they were coming back quicker. So it may be just the way international football is going, and there's, especially at this stage, there's very little Vera Pauw can do about it, other than hope for goodwill, I suppose, from the clubs.
Yeah, and I suppose it also feeds into she wasn't particularly happy about the introduction of the Nations League and where Ireland are going to be when it kicks off towards the latter half of this year. Obviously in League B, when you look at Ireland's progression, and they're very much kind of on the coattails of League A standard these days, but they're going to have to fight their way from League B first and then to move up to the next level. But let's talk about...
Just one thing about Vera did mention, and she stressed that the whole potential for ACL injuries in the women's game, and it's become a theme over the last 12 months. We've seen so many of them, and it's an ongoing study as to why it's happening. It seems to be a case. Hasn't been pinpointed yet, but there's certainly pointing towards the sudden professionalism of the women's game. It sort of jumped everything forward a bit, combined with the fact that a lot of women and girls would have been trained as men. When they were starting off, they would have been given similar training sessions that the men would train us. So the woman's body is reacting differently to these things, and it's a serious concern for the game, because it's putting players out for a season at a time.
Let's talk about the SSE Airtricity League Premier Division, and Derry City won 1-0 at 10-man Bows on Friday night. Dundalk, in quite a dramatic ending to their game, beat Cork City 2-1. Cork had couple of players sent off in the latter stages, and then 2 stoppage time goals, the latter by Patrick Hooban to win it for Dundalk. And Pats beat Drogheda United 3-0. Again, some late goals to add a bit of gloss there. McClelland, and then Chris Forrester with a late brace. And Shamrock Rovers, top of the table now, 3-0 winners at UCD. And then on Saturday night, Jack Moylan with a hat-trick as Shelburne beat Sligo Rovers. Now, let's start on the first game between Bows and Derry City, and let's listen to the managers Rory Higgins and Declan Devine.
Were you concerned that you hadn't put the game to bed, particularly when you were against 10 men?
We even 11v11, Tony, we were the dominant team and had real control, and everything seemed to be in and around their box. And you're right, we should have put the game to bed, but we come to Daly Park and won 1-0. Back-to-back 1-0 wins away from home. We'll take it.
And now 2 home games to come, starting on Monday.
Yeah, big game. Monday, Dundalk, 94th and 97th minute in Oriel Park. They've done that a few times, so we know we're going to need to be right at it on Monday to win the game, and hopefully we can pick up a massive 3 points.
Interview with Declan Devine after a defeat that takes you off the top of the table. I know you weren't concerned with the table at this stage of the season, but how disappointing was that?
The performance was excellent, especially second half. Really disappointed with referee indecisions in the game again. But sure, look, where do we start? I didn't have a goal last week. Bit my tongue. And it just comes back to bite you again this week. You can't get yards out quick enough. A booking after 15 seconds, a sending off after 9 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was. We just up against it. But testimony to the players, full credit to them. We thought we were a better team the second half. I thought we were a much better team against the top side. And we're down to 10 men. We're carrying a lot of niggles coming on the game. But I thought our players were outstanding.
I agree with you that it was a very early booking, but in terms of the sending off, was that not a clear goal-scoring opportunity and was a mistake by your player?
Well, for me, it was a mistake, but at the same time, Christian Nowak's, it's not last man. It's not last man. He's within the goal. He's in around the goal. So, look, again, we just seem to be getting punished for everything at the minute, whether it's right or wrong. We're just carrying no luck with officials. Some of the decisions they book our players, who are borderlining on 4 or 5 bookings, is ridiculous. So look, we just want a level playing field and to be treated the same as other teams.
How difficult then was it to, so early in the game, adapt to having to be down to 10 men?
Very difficult. We had to deal with it. We had to make a couple of changes. We moved Buckley to right back, which gave us a problem in midfield. But we got to make sure we suffer the emotional discomfort of going down to 10 and still keeping a clean sheet. We can't go down to 10 and then a few minutes later concede at the back post. We got to deal with that better. But at the same time, in terms of response, I thought we were very brave. We put attacking players on. We didn't sit on a low block. We went after them. And to be honest, I don't remember James Talbot making a save in the game.
Clark and Twardick in particular made a difference. You brought them on at half-time.
Good players off the bench again. As I've saying this all along. There's a long season to go and players are going to get their opportunities. We've assembled a really strong squad. And listen, if the last two performances this week against Derry, last week against Rovers, there's nothing that we fear out there in terms of how we've went about our posts and our jobs. I certainly back our boys in any game in this league this year.
Okay, so that is Bohemians manager Declan Devine speaking to Tony O'Donoghue after the 1-0 defeat to Derry City at Dalymount Park, which has dropped Bowes to third. And before that, it was Derry City manager Rory Higgins. On the Grant Horton red card, Keith, do you agree with Declan Devine's view that it wasn't a last man tackle and perhaps it should have just been a yellow card?
Yeah, probably. But like I say, when he starts giving the yellows early doors, you're thinking the referee's made a bit of a rod for his own back. But you can see that Declan Devine's very, very upset with the referees. And when managers start saying things like that, you start to think that can filter into the dressing room, and all of a sudden players are going out to the pitch with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. So I think he just needs to rein that in. I think everything he's saying is right. I think it's true. But to be coming out and saying that into the media, your players are going to hear that, the fans are going to hear that, I don't think it's helpful. But I understand it. I do understand it from Declan Devine. Look, it's from a Derry point of view, it was excellent. It really was to win a 1-0 at Dalymount is brilliant. But the big moment in the game when Horton gets sent off, I think it was the 15th minute. Derry go and scored in the 17th minute at the back post, just like Declan Devine said. If you can keep them out until half time, all of a sudden Derry are thinking this is going to be horrible. They're going to have 9 men behind the ball, and we're not going to be able to break them down. When they broke them, it really did break Bowes' back, and it was going to be so difficult to come back into the game. And then you're on a knife edge. Do you go and try and hit them on the counter attack and leave yourself exposed with the numbers that you have? So big balancing act for Bowes. Look, I've been very impressed with Bowes, but the last 2 games have been beaten by Derry, beaten by Rovers. And they're probably going to be first and second in the league, and what order, I'm not sure. I think Bowes will be a close enough third, if I'm honest. I think they are the third best team in the league, but yeah, just little basic mistakes here and there, and no shots on target in the 90 minutes as well. And Declan Devine is doing a lot of moaning about the officials, but that would be a part of call of mine as well. As lads, we had 4 shots in the game, haven't hit the target once, and that obviously needs to change.
Yeah, and what you said about, say, Declan Devine's comments about the referees, and like you've been in dressing rooms before, and maybe you can hear what a manager says to the media about maybe complaints about refereeing or that there's trends of decisions going against them. What do you take from that usually as a player? I mean, obviously, in some cases, there are some debatable decisions. There are some that are more stonewall. I know the penalty against Shamrock Rovers the other week should have been given, but again, the referee's view of it, it's a mistake, and these things happen. But as players, what do you take from that?
Sometimes you just have to take it as being unlucky, because like I said, it's a very fine line to feeling like your heart done by and then walking out on the pitch like there's a bit of a chip on your shoulder. That's not what you want to be going out like. And I remember, like, I've had bad decisions as being part of a team. I remember Sean Dyche saying a particularly bad game at half time. One of the referees were playing really poorly, and he's just saying, lads, there's no point in having any energy towards it, because we can't control that. We can't affect what he does. We can only affect what we do. So don't be losing your energy thinking, oh, the referee's this and the referee's that, running after him, screaming out. Don't bother. Concentrate on your own stuff, because it's the old saying, isn't it? Have you ever seen a referee change his mind after you scream at him? It doesn't happen. So look, I was the worst for it as a player. I was awful. I was always giving out to the referees, but you have to have a bit more educated approach. And like I say, you can only control the controllables, and you can't control the referee's decision. So there's no point getting upset about it. Having said all that, Raf, I understand everything Declan Devine has said. It was a penalty last week, possibly hard done by with the red card as well. On Friday night. So I understand everything he's saying, but I think he's wasting a lot of energy on something he can't control.
Yeah, just on that, Raf, the point that Keith makes, I reckon as well with Declan Devine, there's going to be an added element of frustration, the fact that he didn't have a shot on target. Because I was at the derby with Rovers the week before, and part of the reason why he came out and wasn't going mad at the ref, even though he did think he thought Trevor Clark's goal was offside. I wasn't too sure about that. And he mentioned obviously the penalty incident with Afolabi. But he kind of he actually seemed a bit more, he was like, you know what, we just didn't do enough in both boxes. They didn't defend well enough. And in the moments they had against Rovers, he was talking about Paddy Kirk's chance where at the end of the first half where it was put across from, I actually think it was by Grant Horton, ironically enough, and just didn't score. Didn't get a decent connection on it. It was a good save. But he seemed to be actually, you know what, he kind of accepted that Bowles against Rovers didn't do enough. And I'd say there's another added element to that in the sense that, yeah, he probably thinks the red card is harsh. It's one of them where maybe, you know, it's one of those decisions that I think if it had been a yellow, you would have, I don't think people would have been on absolutely mad for it to be a red. But then if it's given as a red, people would be like, well, yeah, you can kind of see why. Let's be honest, right? But I just think with Declan Levine, maybe there's just that element, just a bit of frustration the way things have gone over the last few weeks, because like they have been one of them where if you go back to the UCD game where obviously kind of, I don't think he tore strips off them, but he was very kind of upfront about the fact that they weren't good enough in that game and wanted a reaction, and then they got it. But in the last couple of games, it's probably just dipped off a little bit in terms of that performance level. But I would say the bigger concern, would definitely be actually making those chances count when they get them and actually being able to have a bit more penetration as well.
Yeah, from the Derry point of view, David, as well, I mean, great momentum for them, given that Shamrock Rovers are now sort of on a roll. Except the only thing with Derry is they don't seem to be always able to marry their away form, which is the best in the league, with their home form, and they've got Dundalk tonight. So obviously for the teams that are going to be involved later in Europe during the summer, they've got a few games in advance, and this Monday is one of those. So yeah, Dundalk going to the Ryan McBride Brandywell Stadium for 7:45 p.m. kickoff tonight, but trying to make the most of, you know, these good nights away from home. It is the issue that they need to iron out. Yeah, and they're going to have to, if they're going to win the league, they're going to have to sort it out. Whether it's a case of like their away form is so good, so that'll keep them in the mix for where they are at the moment. But if they can't get things right with their home form, then they're not going to put up a challenge with Rovers. Rovers will eventually just bit by bit. They're already top of the league, but bit by bit, they're just going to extend that lead, because you're not going to win the league if your home form is that poor. It's just not going to be possible. So, like the thing with Derry, and even again when I was on with yourselves a couple of weeks ago, and it was a good point that Graham Garton made when he was talking about Rovers and the kind of way they were able to use the squad and the way Stephen Bradley was able to dip players in and out. It was a case of him picking and choosing rather than pure necessity. Whereas with Derry, with some of the injuries they have had and players coming back, he was making the point, Rory Higgins was having to throw lads in just to get bodies out on the pitch to try and have the strongest team. Wasn't quite able to maybe utilise a squad as well, because when you actually look at the squad and the bodies they have, it's seriously impressive, you know what I mean? It's just about making sure, getting them all fit. I just think like it's almost the polar opposite of last season with Derry, in the sense that last year, even though they've won 4 of the last 5 games, you know, they're on a good run. It's just because of maybe how some of the results have gone, that one result in the middle of all that, it kind of threw them off a little bit, and the fact that obviously it was against Rovers. But like last year when they were flying and it was a case of, right, well, they're winning games, can they maintain it? It kind of just feels now at the moment, especially with how Rovers now are beginning to crank up, with Derry, until they can get that full complement, is just show that other side and just stick in it, like grind out a win, like do when Dundalk come up, and they'll obviously be flying in terms of the manner of the way they won their game on Friday. They'll be full of confidence. Just try and grind out a win. Just stay close to Rovers for a bit. Get to the summertime if they're able to add a couple of bodies or get bodies back, and then see where you are, because then obviously you're going to have the European games coming in. That's going to add a different mix to it and another element to it in terms of how things are managed. So I just think with Derry, it is just a case of just almost like you always say, you know what, you get to a back end of a season, it's the result that matters. At the moment, that's where Derry are at now, is just stick in it, stay close to Rovers, keep that points gap. Even if Rovers stay top of the league, stick the points gap to where it is now. And then if they can stay in around that before until that maybe last quarter of the season, then it's just going to set up something special at the end of it, hopefully. Yeah, and Shamrock Rovers have Pats tonight, Tallaght Stadium, 8 o'clock kickoff, Ed. And I guess the remarkable thing now, they are top now, and they've gone ahead of both Bows and Derry. But given where they were after the 6th round of games, just how quickly they've got to the summit now, I don't know, what does it say about the chasing pack almost, as much as it says about Rovers?
Look, I think it was Graham Gartland said early in the season. I think maybe after 2 or 3 weeks we were having this little chat, and Graham said he doesn't even look at the cliche. Don't look at the league table until the first round of games are complete. And likewise, Stephen Bradley certainly wasn't showing any sort of panic in any of his post-match interviews. Perhaps it's just taken Rovers a little bit of time to just bring in the couple of new faces, like the likes of Pauw to the team and stuff. Just a little bit of a hitting the ground again, hitting their stride again, I suppose. But look, at the moment they're looking. I just can't see any team beating them at the moment. You lose Jack Byrne for a week, somebody else steps up. Trevor Clark has hit a bit of form. He's looking good. I think Trevor's suspended tonight, but Jack should be back in. This sort of way. So like the quality is there, and they've got the players to do it. And I think maybe even something like what's happening at Sligo could maybe explain the difference between the chasing pack and the likes of Rovers. Sligo, we could probably give Rovers their toughest game this season, and then at the weekend they go and they lose 3-0 to Shelbourne. And it's just depth of squad, really, isn't it? It's just having the quality and the consistency to be able to play week in, week out. There's obviously a few double weeks over the past few weeks as well, which will test teams. And I just think Rovers have the resources to deal with it, and they're showing it, and they just ease their way back to the top of the table. And I can't see them going anywhere else, especially with Derry's ongoing issues with their home pitch.
Yeah, and Pat's, David, I think you said you were at the 3-0 win over Drogheda United there on Friday night. And before we touch on, Chris Forrester's goals, you look at his goals record this season in terms of his influence as well, amid some of the issues that are going on, and he's been brilliant. But notably, the 15-year-old Mason Melia makes his debut, and with all the uncertainty and maybe sense of instability with the manager going, the one thing that they do have on their side is this ability to bring through a lot of good young players. We've seen James Abankwah previously. There's Curtis as well. There's something, in terms of the Pats Academy, that's one asset that they have that is incredibly fruitful.
Yeah, and they've also been very successful, not just fruitful in terms of producing players, but also in terms of like winning games and winning tournaments and all the rest of it. And like, I know it's a little thing, and maybe it's something that even for Keith, but I know people talk about, say, at underage, of course it's developing players, but also like, if lads at that age are getting into a habit of winning games and actually feeling, we want to develop and you want to become a better player, but you go out and win and you be successful. That's what is just as important, especially coming through at League of Work. It's just as important as creating a good player. You might be able to sell. Don't get me wrong, that's the business side of it. Like the likes of, say, Mason Melia, and clearly all the talent in the world. Like, oh my God, when I saw it, I didn't even realise that he hadn't. I thought he had done his junior cert. He's only doing his junior cert this year. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's scary. Do you know what I mean? But from a business point of view, like, they're the types, and you see it with Rovers as well, that they've been good at it as well, in terms of this kind of goes back as well to the point I was making at the start about when we were talking about the Ireland 17s and the academy, like treating it like that side of the business. And it's not nice to say, but these fellas and these kids, they are kids still, but they're assets. Do you know what I mean, as well? And knowing who's the one who you might be able to make money off to then reinvest and bring fellas through, and then who's going to be the ones that might get in around the sniff of the first team. And yeah, mate, like he looked impressive, and like just the physics, like some of the runs, couple of little runs he made, and just little things like just a bit of physicality he had, and awareness to maybe get an arm across the defender to maybe buy himself a yard. Little things like that actually at that age is actually quite impressive. But yeah, for Pats then as well, like in the game itself, I didn't think it was coming. I don't think, like, obviously it was a set piece in the end that broke the deadlock, and it was impressive. But up until then, they looked very laboured, But it's just going to be interesting now, just to go back onto that point with the younger players, that it's probably going to be the model that it's going to have to be, isn't it? Where you kind of say, well, who are the ones who maybe you accept, they're probably too good to even come into the first team, and they're going to be going a bit earlier if it's to abroad or have some deal in place, and eventually they will go if it's to England. But then also, who are the ones that are good enough to come into a first team environment at a young age in the League of Ireland? Because it's probably more for Keith in terms of understanding that, or how that is for young players, because like you see it, and we've already seen a couple of transfers of young lads who've gone to clubs right in England, and with all due respect, yeah, like it's fantastic to see it, and it gets trumpeted and all, but then there's also an element that clubs in England as well, sometimes they just need bodies in, you know what I mean, to fill their academies. And this is just the other way of looking at it as well, where kids might go over, and even Irish kids go over at a certain age, and they might get a decent contract and all, and they might think, right, that's them set, they're going to make it, like they're the next big thing. But it's not the case, because over there sometimes they just need bodies, and you kind of get over there and you realise how much more difficult it is to actually make it, you know.
Yeah, just on that, Keith, actually, just I suppose the different sense of, say, you know, you can be the big fish here within this context, but then when you go over to a club in England, then and there's players coming from all over the world, it's a different challenge.
Yeah, well, there's two sides to the sword. Obviously, Mason's a brilliant player. I had Mason in the 17s last year, and he quickly moved up to our 19s, and obviously now he's moved into the first team. But you look at it from me. I went to Blackburn at 15. I didn't play an awful lot of games. I quickly was too good for the under 18s and ended up in the reserves. And I played a lot of reserve team football, and I would flirt with the first team. So I quickly found myself in that sort of limbo where too good for the reserves, not quite good enough for the first team. And I'm not playing games. Mason will play an awful lot of games if he stays here. Well, he has to stay here now because of the Brexit situation. So, although technically I would have been doing technique sessions 2 hours every morning, 6 days out of the week, I'd have been doing technique work. It made me fantastically a technically gifted player. But Mason will be playing games, and Mason will be fighting for 3 points. Mason will just be in the habit of, yeah, this is my bread and butter. Because reserve games, when you're playing these, anybody who's ever taken a reserve game over the years, or under 23 games, development squad games, whatever you want to call them now, it's not, the tackles aren't full-blooded. Most of the time, it's 14 players dropping down that have been injured, and they're just trying to get a bit of fitness. So they don't want full-blooded tackles. It just becomes a bit like a training exercise. So there's two sides to it. Although I got moved through the ranks quicker because I was under the manager's nose, Mason will be playing games, and people will be keeping an eye on him. The word around St. Pat's Academies about Mason is he spoke about very, very highly. There's already a couple of suitors lining up for him. So, look, Mason just needs to keep his head down, take it game by game, and just try and keep a smile on his face, because at the end of the day, he's a young footballer. Don't want to put too much weight on his shoulders, but he has everything he needs to go on and be a professional footballer at the highest level. I'm talking way beyond the League of Ireland. I'm talking anywhere in Europe if he wants to. So, look, it's very hard to say because he's still so young. Big obstacles still in the way for Mason, but all the tools he needs are there for him.
Yeah, and in terms of role models, the likes of Chris Forrester there, who's also gone across England, he's experienced, I suppose, the highs and lows of that before, and he's up to 8 goals this season after the late brace there against Strada. And I was just looking back through his goal scoring stats over the years, and it's the same number that he scored in all of the 2021 season, and the highest, or the most he'd scored at League of Ireland level was that 2013, 14, 15 period where he scored 9, 11 and 11. So he's definitely having more of a contribution in terms of his role on the edge of the box or in the box as well. And is there something that Pats are doing maybe that's getting that out of him, or is just his experience is just kind of telling at this certain age, just knowing where to be?
I think it's a bit of both. I think obviously he wants to make runs into the box, and I know Tim Clancy, I know he's obviously not there now, but he spoke a lot to Chris about time he's run into the box. And the best player to look at it is Frank Lampard. Frank Lampard was brilliant. Danny Young, centre midfielder who wants to arrive in the box on time. Just look at Frank Lampard's highlights. He times it so well. And I remember being at the PFA Awards at the end of last season, and I was coming out of the toilet and I bumped into Chris Forrester. And one of the things I was always saying on the League of Ireland TV was, if Chris Forrester can get into double figures, it will push Pats up the league. And he stopped me and he said to me, Keith, I ended up getting the double figures, or I'll try and get the double figures. So you think players aren't listening to these sort of things, but they are listening. And look at Chris's numbers. You know, you can look at how many assists and how many goals. What he brings to Pats is an awful lot more than just goals and assists. He is Mr. St. Pat's. And look, I don't think any Pats supporter will thank me for saying this, but I do think the game plan is quite easy when you come to Richmond. If you stop Chris Forrester, you stop St. Pat's. And I don't think that's, you know, I'm not giving anybody a great insight there. I think that's in black and white for anybody to see. If Chris is on song, St. Pat's generally play well and win the game. And if he's marked out of the game or he's having a bit of an off day, generally Pats will suffer. So, look, Chris has been really good this season. His numbers are getting an awful lot better. But like I say, what he brings to the team is a lot more than just goals and assists. His passing ability is brilliant. And with those sprinkling of young players coming in now, Chris's experience in England and just being able to talk to people and that physical approach in the middle, he can mix it physically as well. He doesn't shy away from that. So, yeah, he's a leader. He's everything you need. And like I say, he is Mr. St. Pat's. If you stop him, he will generally go a long way to winning the game of football against Pats.
Just on that, Ralph, just to take on Keith's point there, because it's an interesting one, because I was at that match on Friday, but was actually standing on the comeback, and it's one of the benefits. You're so close, you hear a lot of stuff and other bits, and just don't get me wrong, he'll have a go at lads on that pitch. There's a couple of instances with defenders just not passing the ball out quick enough, maybe taking an extra little touch, or even not being not being brave enough to pass out, and he lets them know, you know what I mean? And I'd say there's lads turning away from him saying, "This fella, would you ever just leave me alone?" There's absolutely no doubt that's probably what lads are thinking, but then obviously it'll pop up. But there's little moments, there was a couple of moments in the second half when Anto Breslin's taking throw-ins, and there's lads showing for the ball, and he's not throwing it to their feet, he's just going down the line with it, or he's waiting and he's going backwards, and I know it's only a little thing, it's only a throw-in, right? But it just kind of, Pats couldn't get momentum, and it was just a small thing, they were stuttering or whatever. And Jamie Lennon comes to show, and Breslin doesn't throw him the ball, and he goes, I think he went back into the centre back, and Forrester had a go with him, and he's screaming at him, trust him, throw him the ball, even though he's getting put under pressure, trust him to throw the ball, and just trying to drive lads forward. Do you know what I mean? So I know it probably sounds silly that it's only something like that on a throw in, but all these little things in a game when you've got a fella driving you on, and there'll be times where lads probably think he's all sorts because he's having a go at them, and he does put these demands on them, but then he delivers at the other end of the pitch. But you need that where it's not just acceptable in little things, always take the easy option, because you look at Pats, that's one of the things against them. If you think once it gets predictable, and especially a team like a Drogheda or any team, if it's predictable about what they're doing and you're able to just get set and right, that throw-in's going in there, they're going to take that time, it's going to go back. You've got Gary Deegan organising that Drogheda team then, and then it's just very hard to break down. Whereas when you've got a fella on them putting those demands, and it's interesting because he always says he's not a captain for us, because he wasn't the captain. Obviously, Joe Redmond got his injury and stuff, but even before then, Forrester said, I remember being at an event at the start of the season doing an interview with him and Jake Mulrenny, and he was asked, how come you don't want to be captain? And he goes, I'm probably the biggest child out of a lot of them. You know what I mean? Probably being a bit self-deprecating about it. But when you see him up close and you hear him and how he does put those demands on those players, that's what you need, because the more you take the easy option, the easier it's going to be for the opponents.
Yeah, and you got to see Drogheda up close as well. I mean, their run without a win now stretches to 7, but the feature, as we saw against Pats, even though the result, if you read it 3-0, it looks really comfortable, they're still staying in games for the most part.
Yeah, it was a strange one. I think up until they had a bit of an outlet with Ferry Draper. I don't know if he was carrying or not. He looked, I know he's been in, people have talked him up, and he's looked impressive, and he did. He's a serious physical presence up there, and he was able to get a hold of the ball and was being an outlet for them. But they just didn't. They just lacked that little bit of a cutting edge, and they'll just be raging at the manner of how he gave away the first goal. Because I think it was around the 80th minute. I think it was, wasn't it, when Pat scored? But up until then, they were well in the game, and that's that. But that's the thing, you know what I mean? The game's 90 minutes. You can be in the game for 80 minutes, but if you switch off or if you drop off and you get punished, it doesn't matter what you've done for the previous 80 minutes. You have to see it through. You know what I mean? You have to. There's a couple of moments and it's little things where, they got a turnover in the middle of the pitch and they just didn't break quick enough, or the pass maybe out wide or the pass forward wasn't the right option, and maybe if that had been picked differently, they might have got into a better moment in the final third. They just lacked at both ends of the pitch, and in the middle, they were able to frustrate for large periods, but they switched off from a set piece, and then after that, they just seemed to switch off altogether, and then Pats ran out easy winners. So they just have, it's easy to say get back to basics, but it's not even just that, it's just making sure they try and see it through. But then again, without being patronising about it, take out UCD for a second, they're the only part-time team left in the league. Do you know what I mean? So that's where maybe this comes into it as well. Do you know what I mean? And that's not to say, do you know what, they're not doing the right work, because you look at their management team and everyone who's there, it's clear that they would be. But it's just the nature of where they are. They're the last of a dying breed in the League of Ireland in terms of where it's going. And spoken about all the academy systems and what's coming through and all the rest of it. But teams like Drogheda in the Premier Division, I hate to say it, it's going to be hopefully a thing of the past, because it has to go full-time professional. I know it's changed the course of the conversation we're having, but that's just the nature of it, you know?
Yeah, and however, despite the defeat, they're 5 points clear of Cork City, who, Keith, they can't catch a break at the moment, because they were going towards this narrow 1-0 win at Oriel Park, which would have been a great result. And then what happens at the end? I mean, two red cards, and then on top of that, then 2 late goals, which were really well taken as well by Cameron Elliott and Patrick Hoban, and the whole thing turns on its head.
Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for Cork. You know, such a big club coming back into the Premier Division. You want to see how they do, and going to Dundalk, even when I was playing, is such a hard place to go. And on the Astro pitch, it's just a difficult game. You know it's going to be difficult. And Cork going up there when Awalabi puts them 1-0 up in the 19th minute, you're thinking, okay, right, let's see what Dundalk have now. And you're just looking for the updates, and all of a sudden the red card comes through in the 88th minute, and you're thinking, okay, a few minutes to go, what's going to happen here? 1-1, another red card, and then Dundalk go and nick it 2-1 in the 97th minute, I think it was. So, look, Cork, it'd be a real sucker punch for Cork, because, you know, you're in that game, you're doing so well, and you're looking at the clock, there's 5 minutes to go, you're still 1-0 up, 88 minutes, there's 2 minutes to go, and all of a sudden the team talk has changed. It just leaves such a sour taste in the mouth. But I've heard Stephen O'Donnell saying it was one of his biggest, best feelings in management, that win, Dundalk over Cork. So, look, it's hard to say, but look, I think Cork's remit is just to beat UCD. If they finish on top of UCD and get into the playoffs, the relegation playoffs, I think that's job done for them. So, look, it's far from, you know, a nail in the coffin. They are where they should be in the league, and they're showing a bit of fight down there. Some of the football hasn't been bad as well. So, well, it just need a little bit of luck, Cork, and I think they could. I think they will finish just above UCD, and all be about the relegation playoffs. But them sort of losses can linger with you, Raf. You know, them disappointing ones. So, need to get that out of the system quickly.
Yeah, and then the Saturday night game between Sligo Rovers and Shelbourne, and I think there's only 2 words really, Jack and Moylan. Albeit, I think Sligo will feel a little bit aggrieved, Keith, with a couple of decisions as well.
Yeah, Sligo will be a little bit annoyed again. We're talking about the referees, and the standard of refereeing in general isn't great. But I don't want to harp on about that. I'd rather talk about the football. But Jack Moylan, I've seen him playing for Shelbourne a lot last year under the spotlight a couple of times, and I really like him. I think he has bags of ability, but what the first thing you get out of Jack Moylan is a work rate. You get a physical presence, and you get that little sprinkling of talent as well. And that's what Damien Duff, I think, demands. I think he demands a work rate first. And I think the one thing Damien Duff would have been saying about Sligo, saying if we can match their work rate, match their intensity, our bits of talent will shine through. And that's exactly what he did. And Jack Moylan to come out with a hat-trick, only 5 shots on target, ended up scoring 3 goals. It's nice and ruthless. And again, I'm sure Sligo won't be happy. No shots on target again, 7 shots off target, all the possession in the world. But, you know, it's one thing that managers and clubs seem to be dominated by now is the big possession stat. Dominating the ball does not mean domination of the game. You know, you can have all the ball in the world, but if you don't hit the back of the net, if you're not ruthless with it, it means very, very little. And half the time, you can be your own biggest enemy when you have the ball. You know, we've seen with Pats over the last months or so, when they keep the ball at the back and it's all very slow and they're recycling it. You're your own worst enemy at times. You're inviting pressure and inviting teams onto you. So Sligo, a little bit of improvement to do, but Shelbourne, Damien Duff, absolutely excellent. I always like in Shelbourne to look at a Mayweather fight. It's not great to watch. It's not too entertaining, but when you sit down and analyse it, it's very, very rigid and it's very, very good. It's very, very difficult to beat. So fair play to Shelbourne.
Okay, and before we turn our attentions to the First Division, next televised games in terms of the Premier Division on RTE will be Bows against Shells on May 26th, and then the week after it's going to be Shamrock Rovers against Dundalk on June 2nd. But of course, in the meantime, we're going to have the Ireland Under-17s, as we said earlier, on the RTE News channel starting on Wednesday. And the First Division it is, and history made by Kerry FC, their first win at League of Ireland level, 3-2 win at Athlone. We're going to play a clip of the goal, the winning goal, in a second, because I think it's a little bit contentious. Bray Wanderers beat Finn Harps 2-0. Galway United continue to charge ahead at the top of the table, 2-0 winners over Wexford, and then Waterford back on track with a 5-0 win over Cove Ramblers. But let's play Ryan Kelleher's winner for Kerry FC at Athlone, and this is from LOI TV.
Right on channel. Leo Gaja here. It's great. Gaja comes out. Off the line by Aaron McBride. Oh no, Diallo has given it. Diallo has given it. It's 3-2 Kerry. Ryan Kelleher with his second of the night and fifth of the season. Kerry go 3-2 in front. We had one similar at the start of the second half where Diallo didn't give it. This time, Conley makes the save. I'm not sure if that's in. I'm not sure if it's in. Our tech people might choose that once more. I don't know if they will.
Okay, so you can watch that clip on the League of Ireland Twitter channel, or if you're listening to this podcast, you can just watch it on YouTube, and you'll be able to try and gain the evidence yourself. So I might.
And you can tell by Keith's face. Keith's not convinced.
And it doesn't look into me, and like the referee is obviously looking straight down at that. The linesman flagged as well. You have to be 100% sure to be given that. And I've seen 2 replays there, the benefit of 2 replays, and I'm not convinced. Even the player that hit it doesn't exactly run off the man, and it's a goal. So yeah. I'm not sure, Raf, but
Ed, what
it's
do you
history,
think?
though. It's history. It's Kerry up the man. Just leave it be. Let's move on.
We'll get to that, because that's the good news. But Ed, in terms of your view of it, there, you've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah, I think benefit of the doubt. I think goal. Give it. Get the boys down there moving. I think God, they needed it. And like to say, it'll be no use unless they can go and build on it next week and add another one. And I get a bit of momentum going down there during the summertime down in Kerry. Be great for football if they could get a bit of momentum going.
Yeah, I mean, Keith, they're up to 5 points now, and I think that's the main story. Not whether, well, I mean, obviously you want to know if a ball crosses the line or not, but in terms of where Kerry FC are, I mean, they had to wait a while. They've had great support down there, but they've had to wait a long time now for that first win, and I think they knew it would take a little while as well, the way Billy Dennehy had been talking at the start of the season. So this just takes a monkey off their back now for the remainder of the season, I guess, when they're in situations like this again, because in the context of the game, Athlone had pulled it back to 2-2, and you thought this isn't going to happen this time, and then straight away Kelleher goes and scores the goal, or doesn't, depending on what your view of that shot is. But it's great for them.
Yeah, look, from a Kerry point of view, they won't care. They really will not care whether the ball was over the line or not. Like you say, Raf, they got that first win. They're up to 5 points, and it's great for the league. We all wanted, when Kerry came into the league, we were all interested to see how we do. And the realists among us all knew it was going to be very, very difficult for them to amass any sort of decent number of points. But 5 points out of 14 games, they're minus 27 goals. So it's a massive, massive job down there. And I played with Billy Dennehy at St. Pat's. I played with brother Darren as well. And Billy was a very, very quiet player. He would get annoyed at times, and he would get a little bit mouthy then. But I think he's been really good in the media. The way he set his stall out, he's told everybody from the start it's going to be a difficult season. We're looking to walk from here. It's they're going to challenge in matches, but Athlone are sitting 5th in the league. They've 19 points, so to go and beat them the way they did, Raf, I think is excellent. So hopefully they can build on it. Hopefully we see something. But they're already 11 points behind Finn Hearts, who are in 9. So very, very difficult. But look, if they can just compete in games, I think they can get a bit of confidence on that and maybe build on just good performances, not necessarily the results, but just having patches of performances will be enough for Kerry moving forward.
Yeah, and David, just before we move on to the remainder of the podcast, Ronan Coughlin, I think, is also worth a mention in the division for Waterford. I mean, he scored again at the weekend, and that's taken him up to 16 goals in 13 games. And obviously, most of his career has been in the Premier Division to date anyway, so we know what type of quality player he is, but he's been excellent this season.
Yeah, he has, and he should be. Like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but like, Waterford, we talk about Drogheda being part-time, like Waterford as well as Galway are 2 of the full-time teams, and with all due respect, like a player like him who could easily be a Premier Division player, so you're thinking, well, what's the issue there? Why is he not getting into a Premier Division club, lads? Who, a fella who can come in and do a job and make an impact, because he's shown flashes of it before. Like, don't get me wrong, some of the goals he's got and the streak he's on is seriously impressive, but it's kind of like you almost kind of expect him to be making this kind of an impact. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know we got player of the month. I'll be honest, I'm kind of thinking what he's doing compared to maybe what some lads in the Premier Division are doing and the standard that they're at. I don't think there's a correlation. Like, I know obviously there's a lot of more positivity around, but obviously with the increase in attendances throughout the league and I mean Premier and First Division. But you look at kind of what Waterford are doing and the backing they have and the calibre of people now that they have involved there as well. Like, they're doing exactly what they should be doing. Do you know what I mean? Do you know, they're going and they're being impressive and they're winning games and like they're beating teams who in some part obviously are part-time, are amateur as well. You know what I mean? And that's not to denigrate other teams. It's not. It's just a case of if you've got that environment that they're working in and the caliber player, that's exactly what they should be doing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well done. Like, I know not to be really keen about it, but you're doing your job. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. Like with Waterford and Galway, like the nature of how Galway are doing as well, like you'd expect Waterford to still, no matter what, the fact that they're flying it with the results that they have and all the rest of it, because of how Galway have started, like they're still probably going to end up in that playoff, you know what I mean? So that's going to be an issue, I suppose, maintaining that. The only thing I can see with Waterford dropping off is if they actually realise, well, they're not going to win the league, so do their levels drop a little bit because they know they're going to be in the playoff, do you know what I mean? But yeah, sorry if that's a bit down. That's a bit down on it with Holland Cochran, but I just kind of think, well, do you know what? The environment that you're working in, this is what you should be doing.
Yeah. In the women's Premier Division, Shamrock Rovers won 1-0 at Athlone. Wexford lost 3-0 to Bows, which is a big result for Bows there. And then Cork City lost 2-0 at home to Sligo Rovers, who have their first win of the season. And then Treaty United were beaten 1-0 by the leaders Peamount and Shelburne. The reigning champions beat DLR Waves 2-0. And while it does to the table, Peamount United on 22 points, Shamrock Rovers on 21, Shelburne on 19, Galway, who had a bye week, also on 19, and then Bows quietly having a really good season as well, up to 18, and then ahead of Athlone and Wexford on 13 and 12 respectively. And I suppose, Ed, and we were talking to Anthony Pine about it last week, but it's such a hard league to predict. I mean, the level of teams is so close in the women's Premier.
It is, and it's making great viewing, really, isn't it? As the sort of season progresses, you've got, I think, 5 teams within 4 points of each other, you know, and I suppose it's great to see a classic team like Peamount still sort of leading the charge ahead of, you know, the now established League of Ireland clubs. Rovers, as expected, have started well, and they probably started better than they even expected to hit the ground running, but you know, then it's just as impressive than seeing the likes of Galway getting rewarded for their endeavours, because they're playing good football and they're putting a good team together. I think Jenna Slattery was named Player of the Month for April, and she's been playing really well, and it just shows there's a good spread of quality across the league, and I think it's just making for a really interesting season.
Yeah, and then returning back to the international team, so that Seamus Coleman underwent successful surgery. Obviously, there was the knee injury at the game against Leicester a couple of weeks ago, and which has ended his Premier League season. And one would imagine, with the way Sean Dyche said he should be fit for next season, rules him out of the June games for Ireland against Greece and Gibraltar. Now, I was just thinking about some of the options that are there, Keith, in terms of who can step into the squad. Obviously, Matt Doherty is the designated starter at right wing back, albeit he's not getting much or any game time really at all at Atletico Madrid since he moved there, bar I think a couple of games and just a few minutes in each. But some of the other options that could be drafted in, you know, the credentials of someone like Andy Lyons, who's done reasonably well at Blackpool, or Festy Ebosele, who's now getting a good bit of game time at Udinese. Do you look at those as sort of options to bring in and bring into the squad for June to, I suppose, give them that little bit more experience of senior international football, even if they don't actually get onto the pitch?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say, Raph. I'd have no problems with Andy Lyons coming in. I know Blackpool have obviously had a poor season, but individually, I think he's done very, very well, just cutting his teeth into the English professional game. Quite impressive as well, popped up with a few goals. So if Lyons was to come in, like you, Raph, I'd be happy. I don't think he'd start, but just because it's too deep, the water's too deep. These are qualifiers, these are big, big games, and having not played for Ireland at all, never been in a training camp before, he's not tasted it. So, you know, if he were to put him in and he didn't do well, you feel a personal responsibility to, and you don't feel like you're testing him at that level. Although, looking from the outside in, it looks like he would be very, very capable, but you feel like you owe it to him to give him a few minutes in a friendly, or 45 minutes, whatever it is in a friendly, just to test him. But I think Doherty will play. I know he hasn't had an awful lot of football. I think it's Sneyd must at this point. He will play. We'll probably go to 3 centre halves and try and, whatever we do over there. But it's going to be very, very difficult with the heat against Greece. We're going to have to keep the ball. We can't be losing it easily. And Greece are not as bad as people think they are. I think the weather will be a leveler. I think we are a little bit more talented than them, but the weather will be a great leveler on that day. So ball possession will be at a premium. And yeah, if Andy Lyons was to come in, I think Stephen Kenny should bring him in. I think he's been that good, but in terms of playing him left now, I think that's a step just too far.
Yeah, and it isn't generally the Kenny way anyway. I think generally when he brings players into the squad, it's not to rush them straight in. So obviously Doherty will definitely start if injury permitting and everything else. But David, just on Festy Ebosele, interestingly enough, because I know one of your colleagues in the 42 was speaking to him about a month or two ago, just about his time at Udinese in Italy as well, and he was getting a lot of substitute appearances earlier in the season. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was watching the game where they were playing Napoli, the night Napoli sealed the league title, and the starting right wing back ended up getting an injury. And since then, Ebosele is now starting games, and he's still quite raw, but there is a sense that he is trying to, he's focusing on that whole tactical adaptation. And like Italy is probably as good a place as he can go to do that in terms of the style of the league.
Yeah, and then like you're kind of correlating that with, say, Ireland chances and all, and like what Keith was saying, like it's one of them where he's been in and out of the senior team. He was in for the squad. He was in for a couple of squads, didn't get into one of the match day squads, dropped back down to the 21s. Obviously got his move. Some people and then were saying, he was because he was flying with Derby and he was playing in various positions, and he got his move to Udinese and said maybe it was the wrong time for it. And he's just one of them where he's got his move over there. He's bided his time, kind of getting the like any player maybe who comes in, and unless you're maybe an A-lister type of player who has to earn the trust of a coach and know exactly how to fit into a system that he's been needed, and maybe he's getting that towards the back end of a season, and because of the position he can play in, and because he's in the mix, he could be someone who might be in with a shout for Ireland for the next squad, because obviously he has been in and around that environment, and Stephen Kenny knows what he's like around the place, and can also add to the fact now that he's getting a bit of game time. I know in the last squad, wasn't it the lad Sean McLaughlin, a whole he was got a new contract there. He was one of the players who was on standby as well in terms of defensively, and I know he would tend to play on the opposite side, but he could be an option. Stephen Kenny was asked before, just on the Andy Lyons one as well. He was asked when Andy Lyons was still at Shamrock Rovers about the chances of him going from making that jump from the 21s up, and not that he poured cold water on it, but he was kind of saying that he was actually more so looking at someone like Neil Ferrugia, because he was kind of highlighting his maybe a bit more athleticism about him and maybe more powerful running that he was looking at. And you look at it, Ferrugia at times has played on that opposite side, but again, I think it could be a bit of a stretch coming in, as Keith's making the point, the fact that it's a competitive qualifier in such a big game. But with Ebosele, I think he's definitely one. And again, I'll be honest, in terms of seeing him and seeing the games, I haven't seen a full 90 minutes of him playing in terms of getting a sense of how he's actually properly doing. But because he's now beginning to play and he's clearly got a bit more the trust of the manager, and because he's already been in the mix with Ireland, you would think that he would be, I suppose, next man up. And then you look at in terms of players as well, like Liam Scales. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of Aberdeen, I know he's had a couple of moments, but you go back to before he went to Celtic, in around that time at Celtic, he was in the mix a little bit as well. So their necessity and needs might mean someone coming in from the cold a little bit for this game, and well, for the two games, So that's going to be another one just to keep an eye on, I would say, over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, certainly will be. Incidentally, I was talking to, and it was actually similarly to the piece you did with Dr. Kevin O'Grady. I was talking to Andy Lyons about 3 weeks ago as well, just in terms of his development. Very impressive in terms of how he views the game as well. I mean, when you actually sit down and talk to him about, breaking down where he's at in his career and everything else.
You talk to him, like it's one of the first things. It was one of the first things that Stephen Bradley even brought up, and even it would have been obviously Keith Long would have realised it too, and would have seen it too, in terms of he's just a player who's switched on, in terms of you tell him something once and he understands it, he gets it, he's not one of those where you have to do loads and loads and loads of work out of necessity on the training pitch. Like, obviously you work on things and you do stuff repetitively and all the rest of it as coaches would have to do. But Andy Lyons is someone who just, you tell him something and he kind of understands why you kind of explain something, and he just cops on very quickly. He's one of those players, and he just seems to, like, again, I've spoken to myself over for different bits of interview. I did a piece on just not long after he'd gone to Blackpool, and it was actually the week that Blackpool sacked their previous manager, Michael Appleton, wasn't it? Who he brought me in, and it was that day Mick McCarthy was appointed, and chatting to Andy for his piece, and just very clued up, just very understanding of the profession he's in, not going over there wide-eyed, you know what I mean, in terms of, keep my know about the bright lights of Blackpool, that can turn people's heads. But he just seems to be clued in, and that's, I know it sounds very simple, but that can bring you a long way in football if you actually have that attitude going over there,
Yeah, and Keith, in terms of Jason Sneyd as well, just last week his contract at Derby, or at least the extension, was triggered. But there is a sense that he is going to move on. I mean, he's done well at League One level this season, but everyone, I think, is well aware that his level is much higher than that. So I know Conan Byrne, back at the start of the season, we talked about Knight, and at that point I think he was playing a lot at right back, just out of position, but since he's been restored to midfield, both internationally and club level, I mean, what's the next step, do you feel, for him in terms of his career? Is it Championship, maybe go abroad? I know Werder Bremen were interested last summer, or is there even a possibility in terms of his immediate ceiling, maybe sort of lower end Premier League? Like, where do you see it?
Well, I think with the way agents and everything is these days, you probably could nick a lower end Premier League team and move to a lower end Premier League team. But I think the best thing for Jason right now, with the age he's at, is to, whichever team he's going into, it's very hard to go in and say you want assurances that you're going to play, but you want to have a good feel that the manager wants you, that you're fitting into everything. And I think at a lower end Premier League team, or any Premier League team, I think that might be a bit of a struggle for Jason Knight to nail down a place. So for his development, I think he should go to a Championship club, or, like you say, a Werder Bremen or something like that. When you look at what Cullen has done at Anderlecht and coming back over to the Championship now, he's found the route back into the Premier League. You'd be looking at something like that to try and get the same sort of pathway. But I like Jason. I really do. I think he's that little bit different to Malumbi, that he will run around. He'll give you everything in terms of 100% on the pitch. And you see him once or twice, he has a nice little touch on him. He is a player. Sometimes we forget that these lads have a bit of ability in them. We so very rarely see it in the middle of the pitch for Ireland, but Jason Knight does have that little bit of magic in him. So yeah, I think a decent, strong Championship club, maybe somebody who's going to challenge for the playoffs, would be ideal for him. But like I said, I wouldn't be averse to him going to Europe, because in my time, agents and mothers, fathers, everybody was dead set against it, because if you went to Europe and you didn't play well, you were very, very quickly forgotten about. But that's not the case these days. So you can throw the dice a little bit more.
Yeah, and throwing the dice, David, I think we might let you go now. I think you're in a bit of a hurry.
I have to do a scale run here. Could be a little bit delayed. So no, thanks very much, lads. It was a pleasure to be on.
Good stuff, David. Best of luck.
Take care.
Yeah. And we do have Champions League coverage this week as well. Of course, second legs, or semi-final second legs, and on Tuesday night, Ed, we've got Inter Milan against AC Milan on RT2 and the RT player. But there's a sense that the tie is over, and then you look at AC Milan at the weekend losing to Spezia, and then there's this big conference on the side of the pitch where the ultras are having let's just say a conversation with the players, and all doesn't seem well there.
Yeah, it was intriguing, isn't it? You just can't see that happening at an English club.
But it happens in Italy all the time.
I know. It's a big part of the culture, the ultra culture and everything. And they were listening, like whatever he was saying, and maybe he was just telling them, you're all a great bunch of lads and we love you still. But they were listening and they were quite serious, and then they nodded their heads in agreement at the end of it. But look, the first game against Inter, they couldn't have played any worse in that. They were just at least they still have a fighting chance of getting back into it now. But to have a joke about it, Inter were playing like the home team, in that match. But it was it was really one-sided, and I just think it could easily flip in the opposite direction. I don't think either team are strong enough to be that dominant. I was very impressed with Inter's forward and attacking play, especially just the way they led the line well, and with the link-up play was really good. I just think Milan have the quality that they could maybe get back into it a bit quicker, but you still get the sense that the final is the other game.
Essentially, yeah. And that other game, Keith, I mean, Man City, Real Madrid was gripping enough last week, and the quality of the goals that were scored, Kevin De Bruyne, his equaliser, Vinicius Jr., before that, 2 cracking goals, and obviously the match goes to the Etihad now, and City are on a roll, at least domestically, and I know sadly for yourself, Arsenal and their title race, that is I think more or less over, if not mathematically, it's certainly in every other sense. How do you see this going? Because it's hard, I would have Man City favourites if it was me personally, but then Real Madrid in Europe, you can't, there's no way of predicting what they're going to do, and usually they come out on top.
Yeah, it's like I'd be like you, Raf. On paper, you're going back Manchester City. The draw over in Madrid isn't a bad draw from a City point of view, but like you say, with Carlo Ancelotti and this Real Madrid team, they don't seem to care what the other teams do. Like everybody was talking about Manchester City having so much possession in the first leg, but Real Madrid don't care. To have the likes of a Modric, a Benzema, Vinicius Jr., who they're players. They want to have the ball, but for them to just say, yeah, you want 80%, no problem. When we get the ball, we will hurt you. And Ancelotti as a coach, he will tell them where to be defensively, tell them what sort of setup he wants. But when he wins the ball, he's not telling Modric, he's not telling Benzema, he's not telling Vinicius Jr. what to be doing. That's just off the cuff stuff, and that's why they're so good, so hard to keep out for 90 minutes. And the one thing about I make Manchester City favourites because Manchester City haven't conceded more than 1 goal since the 19th of January in any competition. They conceded the odd goal here and there, but never more than 1 since the 19th of January. That's a huge stat. So defensively, Manchester City are outstanding. I think Benzema, Vinicius Jr. will get on the score sheet, but I think City might get 2 or 3 on the night, and that'll be enough just to get them past it. But I have to say, I'm really looking forward to seeing Haaland against Rudiger again. I thought the physical battle, it's sort of an old school thing now. You don't see centre halves and strikers going at each other, but Haaland doesn't seem to shy away from it. I love his attitude, just laughs and gets on with it with people. And the one thing from a Manchester City point of view, if Kyle Walker plays right back or John Stones, they like that inverted right back going into play in midfield. Vinicius Jr. is going to be hovering around in that left wing spot. So as soon as they win it, transition is going to be massive because we know how quick Vinicius is. He can be in behind at the drop of a hat and hit the back of the net. And obviously Benzema will just be picking up lovely little holes here and there. So there is big dangers for Manchester City in this game, but I can't see past them for some reason. I think defensively they will be breached, but Haaland, De Bruyne, Grealish, Bernardo Silva, the likes will just get them over the line with maybe 2 or 3 goals on the night.
Yeah, and Rudiger, I guess he is one of those type of players you'd love to have in your own team, but he'd drive you mad if he's playing for the opposition. He seems to love defending, and so I suppose getting under the skin of the opposition. Haaland probably enjoyed it in one way, but certainly he wasn't able to do much in Madrid. But I just wanted to ask you about İlkay Gundogan as well, because he finished last season really strongly when City needed to get over the line against Liverpool. This time, he's the one popping up with goals. I mean, his goal yesterday was an unbelievable finish. The one he sort of flicks behind him against Everton. What is it about him? Because we look at the physicality of all the players around him, the likes of Kevin De Bruyne or Haaland or the Rodri or whatever. He's a small guy, technical player, but yet he's almost the biggest guy in the run-in usually.
Yeah, he just seems to deliver when the chips are down all the time. He sort of goes under the radar, very underrated in this Manchester City team. Individually, he's an outstanding player, but like you say, he sort of gets lost with De Bruyne, Grealish, Mahrez, Foden, all these players. He just gets lost in the mixer. But I heard Pep Guardiola talking after the game, and he said he's the one who won us the league last season, and it looks like he's going to be the one to win us the league this season. And to go back to that first goal against Everton, I can't begin to explain to you the level of technical difficulty that was there. That ball comes fizzing into him. He has a centre half on his left shoulder. He controls it with his right quad, and then I get a pain in the hip when I see him doing that rotation because I just wouldn't be able to move like that. So he's obviously takes care of himself. He stretches, doing yoga, whatever he's doing to get that rotation in the hip. I mean, Sean Dyche breaking down that goal, he's probably saying to Tarkowski, "You're in a good position. Your goal side, you've pinned the ball. And just to rotate your hip like that is crazy. Not an awful lot of power in it, but brilliant improvised skill. And like you say, he is an outstanding player. And there's rumours he might be leaving, and I'd be dead set against that. But this Manchester City team, it doesn't really seem to mind who goes. Joe Cancelo left in January for Bayern Munich, and you're thinking that could be a big upset. But they just keep churning out player after player. But Gundogan will go down as one of the greats, if not. Like you said, it's quite poor that he doesn't get the plaudits he deserves because he's outstanding in there. Probably doesn't score the amount of goals that the other lads do, but the goals he does scores and the performances he puts in are generally top notch.
Yeah, and I suppose before we go, Ed, just on the Premier League relegation zone, seeing as everything at the top, bar the top four race is done. Everton hovering just above, Leeds are just below the water mark as well, and Leicester playing Liverpool tonight, and Leicester actually have a reasonable record against Liverpool. Like, what way are you going in terms of who's sinking and who's staying afloat?
Funny, Rafa, I grew up big Everton fan. As you have to pick your team in England when you're a kid.
Was this when they were good in the 80s?
It's during the great era, yeah. It was. In fairness, they were a great team. My father still blames the Liverpool fans for getting Everton banned from Europe and missing out on the chance to win the European Cup, which they probably had a very good chance of winning back that year. I think it was 86. But on more pressing matters, I think you just have to fancy the teams with the points at this stage. Like there's so many bad teams. I was watching Leeds playing last week, and they couldn't hold on to the ball. They couldn't pass the ball. They couldn't do anything with the ball. They were just awful. And Everton have two, I think, easy enough games to finish with. I think West Ham played a B team at the weekend, but we're sort of relying on. I think they're relying on Leicester to be beaten tonight, and they'll be okay then. But I think the three that were there are probably going to go.
Yeah, we'll see. It's hard to predict that these are. It'll definitely go to the final day anyway. We'll see if Everton used. I remember in the 90s, Everton used to always be kind of bobbling above the surface, and they've always survived. And we'll see if they manage this time. But anyway, that's it for this week's podcast. As I said, we've got Champions League, AC Milan against Inter Milan tomorrow night, Tuesday, and then also the Ireland under-17s first game you can watch on the RTÉ News channel on Wednesday. But that's it for this week. Anyway, Ed Leahy, thanks a million for coming on. Obviously, thanks earlier to David Sneyd, and Keith Treacy, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.